One of the things that I'm learning as well is that, you know, when you get to a certain point in terms of experience, is you feel that, not that you know it all, no one knows it all, but that you have a certain way of doing things, but knowing when to sit back
yes.
and let them do it, albeit them making some mistakes along the way, and not trying to intervene at every step of the way as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, you need to step back and not be controlling. So I think first and foremost is it's a leader, especially when you start getting old like me. I think it's our responsibility to motivate and to mentor and to impart the knowledge that you've built up over 20, 30 years of experience. And, you know, I've got quite a diverse background. You know, I've mentioned I was in the army. I used to own a supermarket.
No. Yeah. Wow. How many lives have you had?
I've had quite a few. And what you learn from each step in your career, you try and lose the bad and keep the good. And I think it's our responsibility as we start getting older and older is to start sharing that knowledge and motivate and guide and mentor the generation below you and teach them the soft skills. You know, it's often when it comes down to management, it's not just what's in black and white. It's not just what the textbook says. It is a lot more to it. There's a lot softer skills. I mean, there's an element of politics involved because you need to pick your battles to win your wars. You want to try and keep everyone going in the same direction, but obviously everyone's got their own thoughts and ideas, and what you'd want to try and do is harness all of those and then collectively take the good, drop the bad, and get everyone going in the same direction. And you know, one of the things that I say to every single person who joins the company is that when they make a mistake, not if,
because they will.
Everyone makes mistakes. I don't know anyone who has not made a mistake. When they make a mistake, please don't hide it. Please don't cover it up, because all that's going to happen is you are going to know about it. It's going to sit on your mind, and at some stage it will come out. That's the thing with mistakes. They're like moles. At some stage they're going to come out the ground.
And it'll be so much worse.
It's so much worse. Just come and tell me. I'm not going to shout at you. I'm not going to give you a letter of warning. I'm not going to fire you. But what I am going to do is I'm going to bring in the right people who can then fix the problem. There, end of story. Yeah. Because I think especially with new staff that are coming in, you know, people that have just come out of university, they've got their whole futures ahead of them. They're still learning, and you know, the last thing that you want to do is break someone's spirit and demotivate them by shouting at them or giving them a letter of warning for a mistake that we probably made at the start of our career as well. We're only human.
You know, coming back to sort of the culture and giving them an environment in which they can thrive, are you the type of leader that would encourage them to kind of push themselves out of their comfort zone? Because everybody loves their comfort zone. You know, my staff always, I shouldn't have used that word, but just talking about that, my colleagues always tease me because, you know, when I was away on holiday in Europe, I'd just pick up the phone and say, by the way, you're going on to appear on this podcast next week. Yeah. And they were like, oh, I can't do it. And they did it, and they were so happy they did it, but knowing the right personality type as well and not push them too hard. So what are your views on this?
No, I couldn't agree with you more. Maybe I get a little bit of a sadistic pleasure out of watching people being pushed out of their comfort zones, because it's natural for us to find a comfort zone and then sit in it. And in fact, what we did a couple of years back was, so what we do at Accuro is, I'm a firm believer in that our relationship managers are the people who should be traveling into South Africa, because that's where a lot of our clients come from, traveling into South Africa to meet with their clients. I think there's sometimes a tendency, and I'm basing this on my past experience when I was running the South African fiduciary company, I would get asked by clients to come with them when they were meeting with their offshore trustees. And typically we would be summoned to the Michelangelo, that seems to be like the magnet for offshore trust companies, and you would get called in there and you would meet some offshore, but it was always a director or the managing director, you know, this high level person that kind of always felt like I had a meeting with, I was like meeting with the Queen, you know, you're like summoned for an audience.
They're the ones who always get to travel.
That's exactly it. And, you know, so you would go in there and this guy it would be such a general conversation. Why? Because he had no idea what was going on in the client's file. And I remember it used to really irritate me. And I know it irritated the clients. I mean, I had many clients who'd walk out and go, well, there's an hour of my life I'll never get back.
They're probably just selling their company more than anything.
But it was so pointless. It was like, how are you? How's the dog? How's the wife? Are the children still going to... and then we're like, oh, let's talk about the letter of wishes. Letter of wishes, all okay. Okay, fine. So what did you think of the cricket? Or it was just, as I say, it was an hour of your life you'd never get back. So when I came across here and I had now the opportunity to fix all of the things that used to irritate me when I sat that side of the table, one of the first things I did is I said to my relationship managers, you do realize that you're going to be traveling in and meeting with your clients. And I think that was quite a novel concept because I don't know if it hadn't been done in the past at Accuro. Well, in those days, Salamanca. And to help everyone kind of get over the fear of speaking, we gave everyone the chance to prepare a presentation on a topic of their choice, and they then had to sit down and present to the entire office to help them overcome that fear of public speaking. And then they would have to, we would do a bit of role playing where I would pretend to be the client and they would come in and, you know, they would now put forward their services. Now, again, as I say, I kind of used to take a little bit of sadistic pleasure because I would give them the worst possible client that there was.
Difficult, moody, rude.
Everything rolled into one. I mean, like an absolute, like, terrible person. And, you know, I mean, we would start off by, they would stand outside the boardroom and they would knock on the door as if they were coming into the person's house. And they would like knock on the door and I would open the door and I'd go, you're late. It just, you know, kind of start off on that note. And then because I've been doing this for so long, I know the questions that I used to get asked that used to make me feel really uncomfortable. And then I'd used to pull them out. I remember I had a client and he was an amazing man. He really was. He was an icon of South African business. He was a guy called Alan Knott Craig. Okay. And Alan Knott Craig started Vodacom in South Africa. He was the CEO. He used to be an engineer at Telkom, which was the South African kind of the landline operators. And Telkom and Vodafone had a joint venture where they created Vodacom, and they chose him to run it. And a smarter man I don't think I have ever met. A harder working man I don't think I've ever met. But wow, this man had
high standards. He
had standards that I have yet to aspire to. But he also had this incredible ability to, no matter how hard you prepared for a meeting, and no matter how much information you collated for that meeting, he would ask you that one question you had not prepared for. And I kind of learned from him. And then I passed that across onto my relationship manager. Shame, I mean, the one girl, she walked out of that meeting, the sweat was like, right, it was like down to her. But, you know, and I threw them in the deep end. Said, off you go. There's South Africa. Go. Yeah. Go book your tickets. Go book your hotels. When you get into SA, I'm not there to hold your hand. Figure it out. Yeah. As I say, I've got 2 daughters, and what I say to them all the time, especially when they're like, I can't do this, is don't shout, figure it out. And that was kind of, I think, the philosophy that I have with my colleagues is that the best way to learn is to figure it out yourself.
Because and probably something else you learned from the army as well.
It was, but it actually goes back a little bit further than that.
So you had another life before.
I learned how to swim. So I used to, you know, these like armband things, yeah. And my brother's 9 years older than me. So I think I was like 5 or 6 and I was still running around with my armbands. And he took one look at this and said, "You're 6." So I said, "I am." He says, "By the time you learned how to swim?" So I said, "Not yet." And he says, "Nah, I think today's the day." And he took my armbands off and just threw me in the pool. And I literally, he threw me in the deep end, and somehow I made it to the shallow end, and I suddenly realized, I could do this. And I think that's really, to answer your question, is that naturally as a person, we will sit in the comfort zone for as long as we can until someone either kicks or pulls us, kicking and screaming, out of that comfort zone until we get into, and that comfort zone then just gets bigger and bigger. It's like an onion. You can start off in the very middle, but as each layer of the onion is, you push yourself and you learn more. So I'm a big believer in helping people out of their comfort zones.
Yeah, and I think that that's it's the best, one of the best shapers of personality as well. Like it's really, you learn so much, and then you doesn't necessarily mean they'll spend their whole careers at Accuro or Prism, but I think the life skill they would have learned, they can carry on to the next job. And talking about the next job, one topic that we have spoken about quite at length with all the different guests is obviously the Great Resignation and the difficulties Mauritius is experiencing with many young professionals leaving the country. Have you experienced that? If so, what are your thoughts about generally how do we get out of this sort of vicious circle that we seem to be in?
Joe, that's a great question. Have we experienced it? Yes, this year particularly. We've been very fortunate at Accuro. We've grown very nicely. We've grown organically, and we have been looking for particular skills to join us. And I think we're a great company to work for, but it's been really difficult to try and find those skills in Mauritius. So yes, it has affected us. I'm not quite sure what the answer is on how we can deal with this, because I'll tell you what my concern is that it's a bit of a vicious circle. Because now what happens is, as that pool of skills dries up and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, then you start getting cannibalism. Yes. People will jump from one company to the next, same industry,
for a few thousand
rupees. Yes. But what that does is it then starts pushing up your cost of labor. And when you start pushing up your cost of labor, obviously that affects your bottom line. So therefore, the only way to compensate for that is to now increase your fees. And then we start running the risk of Mauritius not being an affordable jurisdiction, which, based on experience, is an attractive feature of Mauritius, because people will look at jurisdictions like Jersey, Guernsey, Isle of Man, Switzerland, Singapore, and they look at that and they go, great jurisdictions, great reputations, but too expensive. And I don't know if from a reputational perspective, Mauritius could be considered on a par with a Jersey, for example. So we need to be very careful that we don't start pricing ourselves out the market. What can we do to deal with this? I mean, this is something that we discuss almost on a monthly basis at our Mauritius Finance Board meetings. I know it's a great concern to me and my colleagues on the board. There's been a number of initiatives. I've got to take my hat off to Samad and his team at Mauritius Finance. They've really gone out of their way to try and deal with this through their interactions either with government. They had a job fair recently which went very, very well. So at least they're taking active steps. We did try a couple of years ago to almost see if we could put a cap on this cannibalism by bringing in parity between the different management companies with regards to pay scales. So we asked Korn Ferry to do a sector salary survey. Okay. Unfortunately, I think out of 160 odd management companies, I think it was like 15 took part. So it didn't give us a realistic idea as to what's happening in the sector. It's a problem, Joanne. And you know, I think it goes further than this. If I'm going to look at this strategically, and if I can perhaps use South Africa as a comparison, is that when you get a brain drain, you're drying up that entry level kind of generation that are coming in to start filling the vacuum that is left by the individuals who are stepping out to retire. If we think of it purely from a fiscus perspective, where is the fiscus going to start getting the taxable revenue? Because your retirees are not going to be earning the salaries that they were when they were perhaps partners or directors, and you're not getting in those salaries of those young professionals who are coming through, climbing up through their careers. And obviously as they climb, they're earning more, and you're getting that taxable income that's coming from it. So I think it's a problem. And how do you deal with it? I know that there's talks of opening up the economy, making it less restrictive to bring expats into Mauritius, but
there's been talk about that for years.
Okay, I think, is that not part of the blueprint? So, but I think also realistically speaking, it's not, if we look at attracting expats, and I know that's, you know that's something very close to my heart, and I must say congratulations to the government for implementing the policy that expatriates are or residents are allowed to buy property outside. That is such a great initiative, and I'm so happy that it's finally come in. With regards to bringing in individuals to start doing the work, the expatriates that I'm thinking of probably won't, because I'm thinking of the higher level individuals. And when we look at that 60,000 minimum entry level, well, look, even if you're earning 60,000, most of the people I know that are coming across, they wouldn't be able to afford to live on that.
When you take into account the rent, the tuition fees, the cost of living.
Well, yeah, that is, I mean, and you know, Mauritius is not a, let's use the word tax haven anymore, because when you look at the personal tax that you pay with the solidarity, with the CSG, with
PRGF,
and with regard, and the general cost of living here, it's not a cheap country to live in. So I'm not sure how at 60,000, if we're talking about opening up the economy and bringing people in, then who exactly are we bringing in? Because you're not going to survive. And anyway, if I'm going 60,000, that's perhaps above the band that I'm considering at an entry level. The problem is I'm not finding anyone to come in at the entry level. Now, I know we've talked about this at Mauritius Finance, where we can draw from the universities, and maybe someone studied engineering, but we can bring them into the finance sector. That's maybe where we're going to have to go, is that be less selective or have less recruitment criteria, not look at either accountants or attorneys, but perhaps look at other qualifications and see if they in turn can be skilled in the financial services. Yeah. Cut a long story short, it's a big problem.
Yes, big problem, and obviously no obvious answer.
Solution.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I know that Accuro, obviously you do a lot of fiduciary work, you have a large pool of high net worth clients. We've been talking about Mauritius being a hub for the private wealth industry and asset management for a long time now. There's been various proposals implemented, tax holidays and what have you. Do you think we've been, where are we now in the game?
I think the intention is good. But I think perhaps there are other issues at hand that are blocking it. So I'll give you a good example. In South Africa, a lot of, and this ties back to your earlier point, by the way, with a lot of high net worth individuals, South Africans leaving, immigrating, there is a nervousness amongst a lot of the financial managers that their clients are actually leaving. And one of the ways that one of the solutions that they had was to perhaps establish an office here in Mauritius, come across, live in Mauritius, and then still have the South African office, but have a service offering for their clients who have immigrated and gone to other countries. Because typically these clients, if they've left South Africa, they don't really still, even though the assets are not in SA, the asset manager or the financial advisor is in SA. Yes. And I think these clients are wanting to terminate that link back to SA. So Mauritius would have been a great destination to set up a company here and to then service those clients. And that could have attracted a lot of wealth managers, a lot of asset managers, fund managers, etc. The feedback that I'm getting, one of the main reasons why people are not moving across and taking up residency in Mauritius is the tax. It's too high. You know, again, when it was at 15%, you would have had people falling over themselves to come here. Yes. That introduction of the solidarity levy, the introduction of the CSG, that's acted as a big blocker, because then people are going, okay, well look, let's say I'm paying 25%, you know, it's 10%, 25%, it's not inside, it's on top, but my total is 25. Then I've got to add on that uncapped 3%, so now I'm up to 28. Well, and then I've got the cost of living, which is significantly higher than what it is in South Africa. So let's factor that in. So my disposable income is X. Well, maybe then I should just rather go to the UK or the US or to Canada or to Australia, because yeah, the tax is higher, but I'm getting more value for my money. And then they look at things like schooling and medical, etc. So I think that there's been a lost opportunity there. I think if there was an interest in Mauritius, I think you would have had a lot of the big administrators or asset managers coming here already. There must be some reason why they are not.
I agree with you. I mean, we can talk about tax until we're blue in the face. We'll have another series on tax and we can talk about that then. But I agree with you. I mean, I mentioned to you that I was in the UK for the summer, and it's amazing how I realize how much more money I spend on food in Mauritius.
Oh, it's expensive.
And the UK is not a cheap country.
No, it's not. No, look, and I mean, when we see inflation going up so dramatically, especially, I mean, I was doing my budgeting last year around about August, and I think inflation, it was at around about 3.5%. Gee, so when I looked at June, July, I think we were at 12% in that bracket. That's a massive increase. And, you know, that's the official figure. Often the official figure differs somewhat to, you know, what you see at shop level, at service level. And yeah, so I think there is a bit of a problem there with regards to tax, cost of living, and how that attracts people to Mauritius. But again, Joe, you know what my saying is, it's one thing attracting people. Remember, I attracted my 2 children to Mauritius by showing them a picture of paradis. It's retaining them. And, you know, the stats that I used when we had that last webinar, if 83% of people are not retaining their residencies and only 17% are staying,
that's concerning.
There's got to be a reason why. There has to be. You and I were chatting earlier. I mean, just this year, I've had 4 friends that I have known since I arrived in Mauritius 6.5 years ago. They've left and they've gone to the UK. So there must be a reason why.
And so in spite of all of that, What would you say, because we have a lot of young viewers, young professionals, graduates listening to our podcast. What would you say is the top 2 or the top 3 main advantages of joining the financial services industry as a young professional?
I think first and foremost is because of Mauritius's position, geographic position, it is still probably the favorite jurisdiction when dealing with Africa, South Africa. It's also very well suited to dealing into the Middle East and into Europe and the UK because of, the time differential. So anyone, look, first of all, if I was a young student looking at the sector at the moment, I would be rubbing my hands and licking my lips going, there is no better time to get in.
Yeah, it's an employee's market.
It's an employee's market, and because there is a shortage, you're going to be given the opportunity to learn so much more, because you're not just going to get pigeonholed into doing one thing. Your career path is going to be accelerated, because if you're hardworking, if you're committed, if you're prepared to go, to learn and to go above and beyond and absorb that knowledge that will better you to the benefit of the company will notice that and go, well, here's someone that we can fast track and give them the opportunity. So, I mean, I look at our team, we've had people who've come in who were nothing more than filing clerks, and they are now relationship managers. They are traveling to South Africa to go and meet with their clients. And we're not talking long periods of time, probably 7 years, 8 years. They've gone from leaving school, basic entry level, filing stuff in a cabinet.
So they're still in their kind of late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the opportunity is there, but they're hardworking people. And, because they're hardworking, it's been noticed. And if you're hardworking and your employer notices it, well, then he's going to give you the opportunities to grow. So, to answer your question, 1, it's a great opportunity because the market's not saturated. 2, there are a lot of international management companies here on the island that if you, again, prove yourself. We've just had one of our guys who's now applied to take up a position in our Geneva office. So there is that international mobility that's available for you. Yes. And the third, well, again, because you have the opportunity to, well, what I like is, Europe is slightly different to Mauritius. And I think, you have the opportunity to be able to, through hard work, you can now use that to get in and take up senior positions within your organization. So I came, when I joined here 6.5 years ago, there was 2 directors. Both of them were as lily white as I am, and both were expats. Right. And now we have 2 expats directors, 2 Mauritian directors, and a Mauritian guy who's on our senior management team. So, and all of our managers are Mauritian. So, there's no reason why there shouldn't be promotion opportunities, career opportunities here in Mauritius. It's a great place to learn, and it's a great place to advance your career.
Thank you so much, Gordon. It's been a real pleasure to have you. And as I said, you're a TV celebrity, so I'm really honored to sit on our podcast. Thanks again.
No, Joanne, thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy doing the podcast with you. You're a great MC. You're so relaxed, and I love the way you just get the conversation flowing. So thank you so much, and it's always a pleasure.
Thank you.